Hey everyone and welcome back. Okay, in this tutorial I'm going to start talking about loops in JavaScript. So what is a loop? Well, a loop in JavaScript is used to run some piece of code over and over again. So in other words, let's say hypothetically you want to log out to the console numbers 1 to 100, okay, for some reason. So far, based on what we've learned, we'd have to say console.log, the number 1, and then console.log the number 2, like this, right? So we could say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think I will make you suffer. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so I'm now going to log out to the console numbers 1 through 10. Let's save and refresh, and we get numbers 1 to 10. Okay, awesome. Now the problem is, if we have to do that up to 100 or 1,000 or whatever the case may be, we'd have to write an awful lot of code. So a more concise way of doing this is with a loop. So that's what we're going to talk about in this tutorial. Specifically, I'm going to talk to you about the for loop in JavaScript. Okay, so loops are great because, as I say, you can execute a piece of code over and over again. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk to you about the syntax of a for loop before we write one out together. So how it works is you write the keyword for, okay, then you have your parentheses, and then you have your curly braces. So inside of the curly braces will be the code block, i.e. the code you want to run. So we've seen code blocks before, okay? Now, when we saw with an if statement, when we looked at if statements, if some condition evaluated to true, we would then run some code. But with a for loop, okay, if you think about it, if we're going to start counting at one variable and count up to another variable, the for loop needs some information. So there's actually 3 pieces of information you have to provide a for loop with, okay? So they are, and don't be intimidated by the terminology here, I'm going to basically spell it out in simple English just in a moment. But what you have first of all is the initialization variable, okay? So the initialization variable. Then we have the condition we're evaluating. So while that condition is true, the loop will run. And then we have what is known as the final expression, okay? Now, let's write that out again, but I'll translate it into English. Initialization variable, what is that? That's basically us initializing the count, okay? So for example, if you want to start counting the loop at, let's say, number 1 up to 10, so this would be number 1. So what this is just us basically initializing, I can't spell, I'm sorry, initializing the count, or starting the counter is another way of talking about that. We have our condition that we're, running the loop while that condition is true. And then the final expression, well, really what that's going to be is that's going to be an increment or decrement counter, okay? So if you are circling through a loop, let's say you print out the number 1, after you run the loop, you then want to increase the counter, so we know then that we need to do the number 2, okay? So that is the theory, and remember, the code block is another way of us saying, run some code, okay? So that's the theory of a for loop. It's probably best we actually just write one out in practice. So let's do that. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the for keyword, then we have our parentheses, and then we have our curly braces, okay? Now, inside of the for loop, what we first of all want to do is we want to initialize the count. So we can set our counter variable. So we can say let counter be equal to, we'll start the count at 1. Then we have a semicolon, okay, because we're now on to another statement. We're going to have our condition. We want to run the loop while the counter is less than or equal to 10, because I want to count from 1 up to 10 inclusive. And after each loop, because the thing about loops is loops run over and over again, the loop has to know when to stop, okay? So if you don't have a counter at the end or the final expression, you're never changing the counter variable. So you could enter what is known as an infinite loop. The loop just keeps running forever, and we don't want that. So what we can do is we can just have our counter variable and say counter plus plus, okay? Now, in terms of syntax, right? So we have our counter variable. In the opening part of the for loop, where we initialize the variable or the counter, I'm saying let counter be equal to 1, okay? I've already declared the counter variable. So over here, I don't need to say let counter again. We've already initialized that variable. So here we're saying we're going to run the loop while counter is less than or equal to 10, okay? And then after each loop iteration, we're just going to increase the counter. So what I'm going to do is, let's just log out to the console, console.log, I am in loop number, and then whatever counter we're on. Okay, so the counter variable, comma separate. Okay, so what's going to happen is, let me just first of all, so you understand the control flow, the order of execution here. So I'm going to log out to the console, I am before the loop, and after the loop has run multiple times, we're just going to log out to the console, I am after the loop. Okay, awesome. So what's going to happen? Well, all of this is just comments, right? We can delete all of that. Okay. So we're going to log out to the console, console.log, I am before the loop, okay? JavaScript will do that for us. Then we're going to come down to the for loop, okay? So we have the keyword for, we have our opening and closing parentheses, okay? So the loop is going to run, okay? So how this works is this. We start the counter variable at 1. So we've used the let keyword, we've created a variable, we've said let counter equal 1. That is us initializing the variable. Counter has a value of 1. Then the for loop is going to say, okay, is 1 less than or equal to 10? That will evaluate to true. The number 1 is less than or equal to 10. So using the less than or equal to comparison operator, we're doing a check here. So the first time the loop runs, it's going to say 1 is less than or equal to 10. That evaluates to true. Then what happens is we enter the curly braces. So we enter the code block. So we're going to log out, I'm in loop number 1, okay? Then what happens when the loop has run for the first time, we come up here to the counter variable and we just increment it. So remember, plus plus means just add 1 to the counter variable. So now it has a value of 2. So now what's going to happen is the counter variable has now a value of 2. So we're going to come here and it's going to say, okay, is 2 less than or equal to 10? Yes, it is. That evaluates to true. So we enter the loop again and we say, I'm in loop number 2. That loop has now ran again. So after the loop has executed, we come up here to the final expression. We're going to add to the counter again. We're going to add 1. So now counter has a value of 3. So then we say, is 3 less than or equal to 10? Yes, it is. That's true. So we enter the loop, execute the code. After it runs, we come up here and increment the counter again. So this is going to run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, stop. What happens is, when the counter variable eventually has a value of 10, it's going to say, okay, is 10 less than or equal to 10? Yes, it is. 10 is less than or equal to 10 because they're the same. That evaluates to true. We enter the loop for the last time. We log out to the console. I'm in loop number 10. Then we come up here. We add to the counter variable using the increment operator. Remember, the increment operator is just plus plus, so that adds 1 to a number each time. So when we add 1 to the number 10, we're going to have 11. Then the loop's going to say, okay, is 11 less than or equal to 10? That evaluates to false. We no longer run the loop. We exit the loop now, and we continue executing the code in our JavaScript file. So then we're going to see I am after the loop. So what's going to happen when we save and refresh? We're going to see I am before the loop. Then we're going to see I'm in loop number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we're going to see I am after the loop. So let me just save and refresh. And we see here, I am before the loop, I am in loop number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 10, and then we have I am after loop. So that is the for loop in JavaScript. Let's talk about this again in the next tutorial, because we're new to loops, so we'll see you in the next one. But the key thing about the for loop in JavaScript, it is very popular because it can be used to run a piece of code over and over again while some condition is true. Okay, great. I'll see you in the next one.